So we are going to get ready. As you can see, the chairs are coming up. We're going to have a wonderful panel right now. And to moderate that panel, it's my delight and pleasure to call on Lachlu, close to it, she'll correct me in a minute, also known as Cynthia Jensen-Fisk. She's of the Fireweed clan from the House of Gil, from the village of Anishbaya. Again, I'm trying my best. And she believes that the languages and the culture of the Gitxsan were just sleeping. She's worked her entire life to reawaken them, and she started the Doreen Jensen Memorial Gitxsan Language class in 2009 in memory of her mother. And I think it's safe to say that she's definitely carrying on that legacy and breathing further life into that legacy of her mother by paving the way to ensure that the languages and cultures never die. And in addition to being a fluent speaker and teacher, she's an accomplished practitioner of traditional art. And she is, we're so delighted to also indicate that she is the FPCC board chair since 2018. So please help me in welcoming the panel moderator, Cynthia, to
Simgiget, Sigadam ha nak gan fgubawilsil. Sam lu amchkodi will yaasam satun. Lach loop, Hwam Gitxsani. I Cynthia Jensen-Fisk, Hwam amsiwai. Giskast will not athli. I wilps S偕ÁL will not athi. Anspayach will sawitwi. Sim hatmia nii asdip asquaimalt gan sangis gan al-aljachum luquangan gigyat. Al anokdit dim dabam ama haslaalstem lach yipdit. Chiefs, lady chiefs, ladies and gentlemen, I am so happy to see you all here today, and slightly intimidated too, I must say. My Gitxsan name is Lach Loop. My white driftwood name is Cynthia Jensen-Fisk. I am Fireweed clan from the House of S蔔ÁL, from the village of Kispiaks, or Anspayach. I am very grateful to the Esquimalt and the Songhees peoples and the Lekwungen-speaking peoples for allowing us to do our good work on their territory. As a new speaker and learner of my language, I appreciate being called fluent, but it's a journey. And I continue to grow, and I am really trying hard at this moment to only concentrate on the inspiration that I see around me, rather than the intimidation factor that I feel at being a new speaker. I participated in the Mentor Apprentice program through First Peoples. That's how I got involved. And following that, I became a member of the board of First Peoples Cultural Council. And in October of last year, I became the chair of the board. The purpose of this morning's panel is to have the presenters speak to the value of nations or states investing in the revitalization, recognition, and protection of Indigenous languages. how they came to recognize the importance of Indigenous languages, and what they are doing to support Indigenous peoples. It is my great honor this morning to introduce the members of our panel. Rawinia Higgins, and I apologize for saying that, Higgins, Board Chair of the Maori Language Commission, as well as many other accomplishments. Rawinia was the chair of the review of the Maori Language Bill, and she helped shape the legislation enacted in April of 2016. Do we have Rawinia? Hi. Our second panelist today is Aili Keskitalo, President of the Sami Parliament of Norway. Aili is the 5th President of the Sami Parliament and the first female president. Sami unity, cross-border cooperation, language, rights, and self-determination are her priorities. And our third panelist this morning is Laurel Nash, Assistant Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, Strategic Initiatives, Partnerships, and Community Renewal Division. Laurel has worked in government for over 20 years in the Natural Resource section and is now with the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. She is also currently a member of the board of First Peoples Cultural Council. Whew, I needed that. I will be asking each panelist a question, and they will have 5 minutes to address the question. Number 1 will be Rawinia. What is the function of the Maori Language Commission, and how does the Commission support and promote language revitalization and protection? What have you learned about this approach? Do you have a national plan, action plan?
Tuatahi he mihi atu ki a koutou katoa, ngā mana me ngā reo o tēnei whenua, tēnā roa atu koutou. It is a great privilege to be here and just want to acknowledge all the peoples and the languages that connect us together. So you've given me 5 minutes to answer a very long question. So just for some context, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the Māori Language Commission became official as a result of the 1987 Māori Language Act. And that came as a result of a lot of protestation, but also reconciliation of the Y11 Waitangi Tribunal claim. We have had the Commission came out of that piece of legislation, and over time we have seen the result of being an official language and how active and effective a Commission can be or not. With respect to our country, the Commission had very limited powers. And so in 2015, we were able to review the legislation, of which I was the chair, and one of my deputy chair for the Commission is also here, who was also on that group. And part of what we had learnt over time is the our communities had started to lose their voice in the language revitalisation space, and that the state or the government essentially was determining how what used to be our movements had become institutions and regulated by government for the need of funding. Consequently, in the new legislation, we are pleased that we have used the model of our traditional house, where communities under Te Mātāwai are represented alongside Crown agencies to be able to share and be more coordinated. So Māori look after the micro-language space, looking after families and their marae and hapu and their iwi. And Taurewhiri, or the Māori Language Commission, our role was to coordinate and lead the implementation of the Crown strategy. So we have two strategies, one for Māori and one for the Crown, and it builds this house. And for the Māori strategy, the vision is around kia ukai pua no te reo, let the languages return from babies, so intergenerational language transmission. And kia mahorohora te reo is the vision for the government, which is let the language spread across the country, and combined is to bring them together, kia mauriora te reo, let the language be a living language. And so one of the interesting constructs of the house is that if one side of the house is weak, the house will fall down, and so that gives the voices of our people equal space in that house, and that the Crown or the government voice doesn't always dominate in that space. So we are 2 years into this from the time we moved the legislation. It's still early days, but we are starting to see the effect where our Māori voice in that house has had an increase in resourcing to be able to support those initiatives that are dedicated to families and tribes, and that the Crown has a different kind of approach in terms of that macro language planning space that looks at society and how society can provide better conditions to nurture our families to be able to speak the language as their preferred and first language. That was a lot of talking.
Wow, that was only 4.5 minutes. It's always a good thing to leave us wanting more, so we are looking forward to hearing more from you. The second question will be for Aili. In 1992, Norway implemented legislation giving major language and cultural rights to the Sami people. How were you able to get to the point of official language status? What are the benefits of having a municipal language model?
Thank you, Ologito, Borbeaivi. I wanted to first thank you for inviting me to share our experiences in language legislation and vitalization. And in fact, I will take part in a small workshop or session tomorrow at 11 if anyone wants to hear more. The Sami parliament is a parliament elected by Sami for Sami and gives a voice into the Norwegian democracy from the Samis living on the Norwegian side of Sami. And we are working hard on boosting our language policies. I would like to focus on the main question of this panel session: why should the states invest in language legislation? And I'll give you 3 reasons why. The first reason is that it's just. The second reason is that it's smart. And the third reason is that it's profitable. And this is the Sami experience, but I think it would speak to you as well. It is just because the states, they are established on indigenous territories. that is the fact in Norway. The state of Norway is established also on the territory of the Sami people. So this is a historical fact. Not all states might acknowledge it. Norway does, and hopefully Canada does. They should. Because of this, it is only just that indigenous peoples enjoys the same rights to language and culture, their own language and culture, as the majority people does. So it's just. And it's smart also, because language and cultural diversity makes people and societies smarter and more innovative. No culture should be static. It evolves naturally through time and encounters with other cultures. And indigenous cultures are smart. And how would we survive up in the Arctic, where I come from, without having a smart and innovative and adaptive culture? So our languages and cultures carry knowledge that has been collected and developed through thousands of years. So in a world of environmental change, indigenous languages and knowledge, we have something to offer to the world. And my third argument is that it's profitable. And, well, we are all women here on the stage, but it's only for about the last century that the Western world has acknowledged women's contributions to society. So we know that society changes and prosper when girls and women are getting educated. And in Norway, gender equality is high on the agenda. And they say only when both or all genders are recognized and able to live fulfilling, only then will society prosper. And I think it's the same with indigenous peoples. Only when we are able to enjoy our full rights, then can we contribute to the prosperity of a society. So I think if the states invest in our languages and culture, then our societies will prosper even more, and we will also, it will also make way into the majority society. So those are my main arguments why states should invest in language legislation, in language strengthening and vitalization. And they are based on our Sami experiences, but I think they might, might mean something also to you.
Thank you. I actually come from a nation that is matrilineal, so our teachings from the beginning were that the women held the power, and all the family lines follow that. And it wasn't until colonization when we moved into patrilineal. Okay, our third panelist today, and that ray of sunshine that came up onto the stage, is Laurel. Your questions are, what changes do you hope to see in the future as a result of the commitments that have been made by the BC government to revitalize languages? BC is unique as it has the First Peoples Cultural Council. How has that, having the First Peoples positioned in BC to be a leader in supporting language revitalization?
Hi, Chika, Cynthia. Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to acknowledge the territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the elders, the matriarchs, chiefs, youth, and the presentations that came before us today. How inspirational. And to just say what an honor and a privilege it is to be on the board of the First Peoples Cultural Council for the province. The First Peoples Cultural Council, and my hands go up to Tracy in particular, have continued to be leaders in language, culture, arts, revitalization for the past 29 years. And the board overall, too, has really supported setting some really strong direction in that space. And many have been acknowledged today for their leadership across the country for language revitalization. The First Peoples Cultural Council is a Crown corporation, and as part of the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, and you did hear Minister Fraser speak yesterday, those that were able to go to the opening, and he does send his regrets. He really wanted to be here and would have loved to have been on the panel today, but wasn't able to do that. The council itself, as many of you probably know that are from Canada and British Columbia in particular, has set up such a strong space for programming and meeting communities where they need to be met. The language nests, supporting speakers in community, and one of the newer ones that has been really inspirational for me to hear about is also the silent speakers, and supporting those individuals, both just in the language, but the all-around supports for being able to be feeling well enough and strong enough to actually go back in and explore those languages. So those are just a few of the things that the council does. They do so much. The investment of the $50 million last year that the province has made towards revitalization of languages has really just allowed them, I think, to take their shoestring budget, in my perspective, and actually really start to grow. It isn't enough, but to really start to grow, have the supports out there, the coaches, and support communities in a bigger way than they have been able to do in the past. So they have been jumped in both feet, had a business plan in place, ready to go whenever that opportunity would arise, and so they have hit the ground running. So I, again, commend them on that important work, and it's going to do nothing but grow. And we've also seen over the last couple of years the arts and heritage aspects of the work that the council does as well, and they're so interconnected to the language, so that's so important. And as a ministry, how we've been trying to continue to support this work is really just enabling, kind of getting out of the way, and if they're needing allies and us to be supporting or pushing or collaborating, then we're there. And I'm on the board so that I can provide a strategic lens in that space and kind of connect people as much as possible. So that, again, is a real privilege for me, and it's very humbling to be on that board with the wealth of knowledge and wisdom of the many that are there. As I go forward, I think continuing to support tools, supporting those that are in remote locations, using some of that technology that's available for both the young and the old to support schools, to support programming. And how do we continue to grow on the really innovative approaches that the council has towards urban youth and individuals that are away from home, and supporting them with their language work that they want to do, and expanding on that as well. And you probably heard Minister Fraser talk about language legislation, the UNDRIP legislation that we are moving forward with this fall as a province. So we've been doing that in collaboration with the First Nations Leadership Council. So that's the first time that we've ever drafted legislation together, and so much of UNDRIP and the TRC are pointed towards language and culture, and so we are hopeful that as we continue to move forward in partnership with our Indigenous partners across the province, that will enable that work, as well as to support the federal legislation C91. And then finally, because I'm probably over my 5 minutes. Okay, sorry, and I meant to speak the least. Finally, I think a really important thing that we're doing in British Columbia is ensuring that as part of every ministry's mandate, that UNDRIP and the TRC calls back to action are part of their responsibility, not just one ministry. And so we're all working very collaboratively and in partnership with our Indigenous partners in that space. So thanks, and sorry for running over.
Thank you, Laurel. Yeah, I agree. The next questions will be for all of the panelists, and you will have 2 minutes to be as insightful as you possibly can. Question number 1, why is it important for countries around the world to support Indigenous peoples by investing in the revitalization, recognition, and protection of their languages? And we'll start with Rawinia.
So the important part around this and what we found over our journey in having an official language status is that the government side of things is around providing that macro level or societal level of ensuring that the conditions are right, because one of the outcomes, of course, of colonisation that we heard in the keynote speaker was around the detriment to our identity, our pride in ourselves, and our belief that we are important and we play an important role in our countries. The other part to this is around ensuring that the voices of our people are never lost, and that we cannot always rely on the government to be able to empower ourselves. And when it comes to language revitalisation, one of the key messages that I think is important that we've had to learn over at least 3 decades is that the government cannot control the language that you speak in your home, and that we are able to ensure that the next generation can have the language if we believe in ourselves and ensure that we speak the language in our homes. If we don't do that and we continue to allow the state or the government to determine what those initiatives look like, then we're only just learning bits of the language. We're not ensuring that the language is passed down naturally in a normal kind of way. And so the government should be finding ways of making those conditions possible where our children go from their homes into their schools or into their communities and know that their language is an important language because that language comes from the land. And if we continue to box everything into small packages, then our language will only ever stay like that and not be heard across the nations. And so the role of the government should be about supporting that, because language revitalisation is intergenerational. It takes three generations to restore a language. It only takes 1 to destroy it. And so we have to plan today for a future that we might not be part of, but if we don't need the state or the government to enable that to happen. We just need to speak to our children and our grandchildren in our language and believe that it is important.
Thank you. Aili?
Thank you. I kind of jump-started that question, so I'll just start with repeating my 3 main arguments. States should invest in languages because it's just, it is smart, and it's profitable. But I'd like to expand a little bit on the first argument, it's just. For example, I'm a Sami woman, and I do not consider myself to be Norwegian. I'm a Sami living in Norway, so I'm a Norwegian citizen. Being a Norwegian citizen, I would expect that I get the same public services as any other Norwegian citizen. But of course, they have to take into account that I'm from a different people, and I might speak a different language. So how are a state like Norway going to provide to Norwegian citizens who are Sami and might be Sami language speakers public services at the same level as they offer to any other Norwegian citizens if they do not provide it in the Sami language? My mother is elderly. She needs to speak in Sami to her doctor or to healthcare professionals. And if she doesn't get to speak in her own language, how can we be sure that she's communicating and getting the services that she needs and the treatment she needs? It is a matter of life and death when it comes to health services. So health services, like public services, they should be provided in the right language and with cultural sensitivity. So language investments are also a matter of life and health and human rights. And that is, in my view, a really strong argument for states' investment in both language legislation, but also in funding of public services in indigenous languages.
Thank you. Laurel?
Thanks. I think that the keynote speakers spoke very well to this and the importance of it, so I'll be very brief and try to get back on track. You know, language is so fundamental to cultural identity and traditional governance and all forms of governance, and to the wellness of community. And so it is imperative that we are funding language revitalization and supporting that work. And the only thing that I will add is that it is unique for different communities, and in British Columbia we see that, and so we want to meet them where they are met with that, and I think First Peoples Cultural Council is doing a really good job of that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So I've just been told that we've overtalked. So.
No, never. Just, there's one thing.
So with that, I will say Sim we hatmia losum. A very big thank you to our panelists today. Language recognition, language revitalization, and language support and protection. It is not too much to ask for. Hatmia.